thought, ideas, and writings. So that's what this paper wants to challenge. If we speak about Ahmadu Bamba and non-violence, let's speak about non-violence in terms of Ahmadu Bamba's own ideas. Going to paragraph 2, one of the most important challenges in any discourse regarding Ahmadu Bamba is to persuade people to take him on his own terms. A mystic whose life was based on devotion to knowledge and worship and to community formation may be more profitably interpreted on terms that are his own. Now, we are fortunate that we have a large volume of writings from Ahmadu Bamba. If you go to the library in Touba, you see how many hundreds of books he wrote. And in those writings, he transparently stated his concerns and ideas. Now, Ahmadu Bamba and non-violence is a typical example of what I'm addressing, that we need to interpret Ahmadu Bamba on his own terms, not in terms of, as Sheikh said just now, that in terms of what the anthropologists or the sociologists want to understand. What did Ahmadu Bamba mean by non-violence? So there are two aspects which need to be addressed. First of all, what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadu Bamba? What does he think non-violence is, and how was it applied by him? These are two different questions. Now, I have not found this distinction in the literature at all, not the distinction of what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadu Bamba and how was it applied. Usually we don't have this distinction at all. So the ontological question of what Ahmadu Bamba means by non-violence is almost never addressed by anybody. We look upon, Ahmadu Bamba versus the colonialists. That's how it was applied by him. So I have not found this distinction in the literature. The first question may require, that is, what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadu Bamba? It may require a somewhat theoretical answer. Whereas one may seek a more practical answer to the second question of how did he apply non-violence. As far as I know, there has been little published on the first question. And if anything has been published on the second question, it addresses Ahmadu Bamba's struggle against the colonialists and his use of non-violence as a response to colonialism. So now I would not seek to relegate the anti-colonial aspect of Ahmadu Bamba's life, particularly as he lived the last 33 years of his life in exile and under house arrest. My contention is merely that it is necessary to regard the second aspect, that is his practical struggle using non-violence, as being based on the first. In other words, to formulate a discourse with regard to Ahmadu Bamba's legacy of non-violence as praxis based on his own theoretical ideas and concerns with regard to non-violence. Now, this is very important, otherwise we get the whole thing inverted. If we don't know what Ahmadu Bamba means by non-violence, what is the point of merely looking at how he applied it? So going on, nowadays, when we think of non-violence, we may think of such figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Contrary to Gandhi in India, for example, the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba was not a purely tactical or strategic type of non-violence, born of a philosophical dogmatism and used to secure a negotiated settlement with the British colonialists, thus facilitating a peaceful transition to independence. That is not to say that Gandhi did not hold, Mahatma Gandhi, we can't say that he did not hold his views on his religious and philosophical views seriously, but rather that he had gradually become intellectually convinced of their correctness and thus decided to adhere to these views. Now, there is a big literature on this. Gandhi's philosophical evolution through grappling with various religious and philosophical ideas until he came to adopt a certain form of Hinduism, a non-violent form, is, for example, a very popular study is B.R. Nanda's study on Mahatma Gandhi, published by the Oxford University Press in 1989. It shows you clearly the religious and philosophical evolution of Gandhi, the intellectual growth of Gandhi, where he grows to adhere to non-violent ideas. This is altogether different to the case of Ahmadu Bamba. His gentleness was primarily due to spiritual reasons, which must be regarded as the basis for the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba, whereby he had attained a lofty spiritual station and had been divinely endowed with a laudable nature. An analogy between the reasons for the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba and the reasons for the non-violence of Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him, was made by Ahmadu Bamba by himself in the Qasida Mafatih al-Jinan wa Maghaliq al-Niran on pages 4 to 8. Now, I only have 10 minutes, and this is a 60-page Qasida. So, and if I really was going to speak at length, I would have spoken for at least half an hour on this Qasida. But okay, I'm only going to speak for 2 minutes on this Qasida. Now, it's a 60-page Qasida, okay, but one of the main points is, in the case of Ahmadu Bamba striving to imitate the Prophet totally, this had led to him being close to the Prophet and thus gaining spiritual purity and the protection from God. This is the point that the Qasida seeks to make. On page 6, Ahmadu Bamba states, "My religion is the love of God and the love of the one by whom the enemy is suppressed." In other words, the love of God and the love of the Prophet are the weapons which Ahmadu Bamba is going to use to suppress the enemy. Page 6 of Mafatih al-Jinan further states that Ahmadu Bamba was forgiven and purified. He states, "He, God, purified my existence as a servant." And on page 7, he says, "My Lord eradicated my evil. How wonderful is my Lord." Having reached this station of closeness to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and having gained purification from God, he was now protected from harm. Again, on page 7 of Mafatih al-Jinan, Ahmadu Bamba states, "He directs dislikable things to other than me. He protects my sanctity." And also, Ahmadu Bamba states, "He repelled harm to other than me. And so it was repelled." To summarize then, and I'm speaking very summarily here, 60-page Qasida, I'm speaking about it in 2 minutes. The non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba consisted of him striving to imitate the Prophet, which had led Ahmadu Bamba to, number 1, gain purity and a lofty spiritual nature, number 2, enjoy the eradication of all his evil traits, and 3, to receive divine protection in the face of a hostile enemy. Therefore, this divine approach to non-violence was altogether different to Gandhi's approach. Now, what are you going to call this divine approach to non-violence? Are you going to call it non-violence of Islam, Tawhidic non-violence, non-violence of the unity of God? What term are we going to use? I'll come up with a term. Let's see what you think of it. For Ahmadu Bamba, it had become a form of non-violence born out of certitude, as God had assured him that he would be preserved from all human machinations. Therefore, before the colonial authorities sought to adopt aggressive tactics against Ahmadu Bamba, he had already received certitude of divine protection. Right, so I would like to utilize the term transcendent non-violence, something that transcends material, in other words. The word transcendent has many meanings you can apply to it. There is a Kantian term and so on and so forth, but transcendent in the sense of something beyond material means. So transcendent non-violence can be applied to as a term which describes the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba, as opposed to an ideological type of non-violence which Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King applied. Furthermore, I would like to suggest that looking at Ahmadu Bamba's non-violence solely in terms of the politics of colonialism would be to miss the main point of his life's work, as stated by him, which involved striving to undertake personal spiritual growth and to create a society which was within these parameters. That's the presentation I want to give. But Ahmadu Bamba said, "Ujahidu bil ulumi wa tuqa." His main struggle was with knowledge and piety. So this was his main concern. So his non-violence needs to be seen in that light. So I hope I haven't spoken for more than 10 minutes. I think that's my 10 minutes up. So I'm very happy to take any questions any of you have.
Thank you so much, Ahmad, for sticking to the time and really for introducing to us a kind of hermeneutics and philosophical examination of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba thinking of non-violence that certainly is missing in much of the literature on non-violence in Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. And what this does is not only really thinking of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba as non-violent from within, that is taking seriously his own thinking about it, but it also removes us from this understanding of the history of the Muridiyah and the history of Islam in Africa in general as just a response to colonialism. So what you're telling us here is that these practices and these ideas are very much rooted in a long genealogy of philosophical understanding of nonviolence that take us back to Prophet Muhammad. Thank you very much for bringing this perspective. Now, I would like to invite Sohibu Kebe to share his thought about this, either as a short contribution or as a question. And then after Sohibu, I will open the floor to others to comment.
You are on mute, Sohibu. Unmute. Move. Sohibu, you are on mute. You got to unmute. You may want to go. You may want to log out and come back in.
Okay, these are the vagaries.
Okay, it's good now. It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm so happy to be with these great scholars and ulama talking about our Sheikh Ahmad Bamba and his legacy of non-violence. I'm so happy to be with. First of all, I have to give a special thanks to Professor Serigne, who gave me this opportunity to participate in this debate. And I'm very happy also to be with Dr. Pirzada, whom I love a lot, because I have the opportunity to read his book about Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, how to say, epistemology of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. It's a good book, mashallah. And just I want to comment on his lecture in 2 points. First, the root of nonviolence in Islam. As Dr. Pirzada said, many people discuss the idea and the practice of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba of nonviolence, but in only one angle, whether politically or sociology or in other angle, but not in Islamic view and Islamic view of life. I think that the base of nonviolence of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is rooted in, as Dr. Sheikh Babu said, in Islam teaching, in Islam religion. If we look at the Hayat al-Anbiya, if you look at the life and practice of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and his Sahaba, his companion, we see that they are the first who practice this nonviolence in their life. The Prophet himself, before he immigrated to Medina, he was prohibited to use weapons to defend from the attacking of the kuffar. He was ordered to follow a sabr. And if we read Quran, the ayat and verses that was revealed before the Al-Hijrah, we see so many verses talking about الصبر and ولمن صبر وعصر إن ذلك لمن عزم الأمور, who practice الصبر. He is one of the best of al-azm. And we see the Sahaba alayhim salam, alayhim ridwanullah, was persecuted during that time, and they was using sabr, patience, and never used weapon to defend against themselves. The Prophet himself was, when he go to Taif to seek for having support from people of Taif, he was badly treated there. They throw stone to him, and they mocked it at him. But when Jibreel came and told him that Allah, if you want to curse them and to send a punishment on them, they will disappear right now, and God will crush these two mountains on them. But the Prophet ﷺ forgive them and said, may Allah will bring some believer from their seat. So this is the practice of non-violence. And we see Al Yasir, some of the Prophet companions, they were persecuted, and some of them was killed, and they never use weapon. And even in the first one who practiced this non-violence is Habil. If we read Quran, we see that وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ Habil said to his brother Qabil, لَإِنْ بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَيْكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدَيَّ إِلَيْكَ لِأَقْتُلَكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. If you want to kill me, I'm not wanting to kill you. Why? Because I have God-fearing. I'm God-fearing. I have fear of God, the Lord of the universe. إني أريد أن تبوء باسمي واسمك فتكون من أصحاب النار وذلك جزاء الظالمين. This is the first person who practiced non-violence. He was his brother wanted to kill him, but he never used weapon to defend himself or to kill the person who wanted to kill him. So Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, when he came to defend the interests of his people, he just practiced the teaching of Quran, the teaching of the prophets, and the teaching of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But the second point I want to say is that the characteristic of non-violence method of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, we have to put light on. The non-violence for Sheikh Ahmad Bamba doesn't mean to accept, to be humiliated, to be bad treated. Doesn't mean how to say a negative peace way of life, that you accept all bad things in your life without reacting. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, as Dr. Pirsad said, use the method of al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. And if we want to understand his method of non-violence, we have to read these qasida, Ya Jumlatan, qasida Ya Jumlatan, and Laysa al-Birru, and Ilhamu Salam, mainly Ilhamu Salam. In this, and Qasidatul La Taj'alu Du'a ar-Rasul, and so many other qasaid in Fulkul Mashun. The qasaid he called qasaid al-Jihad, the qasaid of of jihad. In these qasaid, you find that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba outlined and put a whole strategy of self-defensing, whether in the field of theology, the field of ideology or theology, moral and social and economic. Because khidma is one of his non-violence method. And I'll say, if you read Layth al-Birru also, or Ya Jumlatan, we find that he put a whole strategy to fight against the influence of non-believer, the colonial French, by al-jihad bil-ulum wa bil-tuqa. He said, inni ujahidu bil-ulum wa bil-tuqa abdan khadiman wal-muhayminu shahidu. And he explained all the weapon, but not a physical weapon, but a spiritual weapon. He said, "Sayf alladhi yafritu la man tallasu tawhiduhu." He used other weapon, that is tawhid, that is al-fiqh, that is tasawwuf, that is love of Allah, love of the Prophet, and living the true life of Islam. And I invite Dr. Pisada to read again all these qasaid, Layth al-Birru, mainly Layth al-Birru and Ilham al-Salam, and La Taj'alu Du'a Rasul. And I think he can find a lot of theoretical and practical of the non-violence of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, inshallah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sheikh Su'aibu. Thank you so much. I think I found your contribution particularly helpful for a student of the Muridiya, and you have suggested important sources to deepen our understanding of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba's philosophy and practices of non-violence. But you raise really a question that I find particularly interesting. You use here the concept of self-defense, which most of the time people do not associate with non-violence. And I would like to invite Dr. Pirzada to comment on two concepts that actually came in Sheikh Su'aibu's own questions: the question of pacifism and the question of self-defense. Can we reconcile those two terms, pacifism, self-defense, and non-violence, in the writing and thinking of Ahmadu Bamba? Or if they are different, how do you parse those differences?
Okay. Funnily enough, you've touched on something that does trouble me here. What troubles me here is that we can see the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba and interpret it as pacifism. What I would like to, I'd like to use a term with regard to Ahmadu Bamba. What I would call it, it's like I can't say vigorous non-violence. This doesn't make sense in English. Something like activist non-violence. You need some term like this, because Ahmadu Bamba was anything other than a pacifist. I think the brother, the way he spoke, more or less reflects my ideas. That if you see in the life of Ahmadu Bamba, if he was a person of a certain spiritual station of non-violence, he was so active in terms of creating a vibrant community. This is vibrant non-violence. Also, non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba is not turning the other cheek non-violence. This is not it either. You know, I see nothing wrong with the brothers and sisters in a community learning self-defense. I see nothing wrong with them learning martial arts. We teach our children here in London, we teach them boxing. I myself have boxed in competitions. So there's nothing wrong with this at all. So going to inner city communities in America and educating them in the teaching of Ahmadu Bamba, making real humans out of them, and at the same time training them physically, is a great thing. You know, I see the situation in America as a situation where you can't afford to be weak. And when I was in Los Angeles, some of the gangs had become Muslims, and they dealt with gang life, you know, in an Islamic way. And so, you know, I see, not to speak too much about this, to answer you very directly, the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba, as far as I understand it, involves self-defense, involves human dignity, involves not bowing to oppression. It involves all those things. But the goal is to try to change the other person as well, to change the other person. Your high moral position, your supreme moral example is what changes the other person. So that's part of it as well. But to answer you directly, I don't see this non-violence as pacifism at all. I see it as very activist non-violence, which seeks to integrate certain higher principles into society, but in a vigorous manner. Sometimes it may be necessary for people to defend themselves. I think self-defense is no offense would be a slogan that Muslims would profit from. So that's how I see the non-violence of Ahmadu Bamba.
Thank you so much. If I don't have another reaction, I would like to build on what Dr. Pirzada said. So could we consider then the idea of passive nonviolence, active nonviolence? Can we make those nuances between the type of nonviolence?
What I think is that what my concern was this. My concern was when I read the life of Ahmadu Bamba carefully, this is a very, very active life, a life of great activism. And for a person given to study and teaching and worship, the degree to which he involved himself in society to create a viable society, I think I feel that the desire to speak about Ahmadu Bamba as a very active, socially active person. When we use the word pacifism, the problem with that is we seem to, there are religions, particularly Eastern religions, where non-violence involves yourself. What in the Hindu religion, there's a Sanskrit term called vairagya, which means that you are desireless. You are sort of like, you're in a condition of desirelessness where you can even be separated from society. So Ahmadu Bamba's non-violence is certainly, without any doubt, socially active non-violence. That's the distinction I want to draw. There is a social activism, a vigorous social activism in Muridiya, a work ethic as well. The work ethic and the vigorous social activism is the distinction I'm looking for.
Thank you. Serigne, would you like to add something to further clarify your own intervention?
Yeah. Because so many people think that if we say non-violence, it means like Sayyidina Masih, Sayyidina the Christ, when he said, if someone, if someone knock your head, give him the other side. And that means a Muslim or a believer must accept the badness in the society. And that is not the teaching of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu, fa in lam yastati' fa bi lisanihi, fa in lam yastati' fa bi qalbihi, wa dhalika ad'afu al-iman." If someone see munkar, something wrong, something bad in the society, he must act to change this negative thing in his life according to his means. If he can change it by his hand, like using weapon, we can say that, you have to do. And if you can't, you have to use another mean, by your tongue, by your speech, by your something like, trying to be active in society to change the bad things that happen in the society. If you can't to use all this at the time, you can change the things in your heart. And so many people think that the Sufi are pacific, non-violent. They don't use weapons. They are they stay in their how to say the al-khawaniq and the real Islam and the real teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is to be active, to try to change the bad things, but in the best way. In this case of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, we see that he lived in a society invaded by the colonial. They want to change their belief, their culture, their civilization, their way of life. All these is bad things, as munkar, as the Prophet said. And Ahmad Bamba stay non-active and regarding the bad things happen in the society without reacting, without doing nothing? No. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba was very active, and he used the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam to change these bad things, because in our history we see so many other religious leaders who use weapons, like Sheikh Omar al-Futi, like Sheikh Mabba Jahuba, and other religious leaders, and other even kings like Ladjor or something like that. But Sheikh Ahmad Bamba don't use all these methods, because that would lead the people, the population to destruction. So he used the best way to self-defense, to protect his people, is al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. And that is a continuation of the method of the prophets. There's nothing new. There's nothing, what they say, bid'ah in this approach, in this method of jihad. Is just ihya wa tajdid, is just revival of the way of the Prophet. Because Ahmad Bamba was a mujaddid, so all he used to do in his life must be in accordance with the teaching of the Prophet. That's why he used the Islamic term, Islamic reference, to find a good solution for the problem of his people, of his time.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So listening to you, Sheikh Suaibu, and listening to Ahmad, I was reminding of these thinking attributed to Ghazali, and of course we know that who Ghazali is. When we think of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, he called him master. And Ghazali is reported to saying that the attitude of the ulama or the cleric toward the unjust ruler should be fight him with the tongue, the pen first, and if that can lead to fitna, then fight him with the tongue. And if fighting him with the tongue might lead to fitna, then hate him in your heart. Don't love him.
Yeah.
So this is what Ghazali said. And Sheikh Ahmad Bamba himself, being a disciple of Ghazali, we clearly know that his thinking on non-violence was actually informed by Ghazali. And one thing you said, Serigne Souaibou, was the idea of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba understanding clearly that military confrontation with the French would lead to the destruction of his people and of people. In fact, people will lose life. And that is the same attitude actually he had against also the rulers of the world of kingdoms before the coming of the French. So Sheikh Ahmad Bamba has not changed. He has not varied his attitude toward the French. He was just continuing the same trajectory that he was in under the world of colonization. So Ahmed, then my idea here is, what do you make of the concept of maslaha then? Maslaha, the common good. So how does the concept of maslaha then fit in Sheikh Ahmad Bamba's idea and philosophy about nonviolence?
First, I'd like to say that to summarize the discussion to this point, and then we'll get to maslaha. You know, Al-Ghazali was reacting to the political problems of his time. So he was giving a response of what was possible in his time. Ahmad Bamba was reacting to his time and given to that time. But I think my conclusion from a lot of reading of Ahmad Bamba is that I think what Ahmad Bamba is teaching us is the way to spread Islam in this time. That here we are in a time where we are living in societies where we can speak of Islam. You know, you can in your society, I can in my society. So we have this openness. There was a scholar, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, you may know him. He said that maybe we're in a time where you don't need to do to by force enter into a city to speak about Islam. You don't need to do jihad to open a city to speak of Islam. We're in a situation where we can actually go on an aeroplane and establish a conference for Ahmadu Bamba in any city in the world. So maybe in this time, the struggle is ujahidu bil ulumi wa tuqa, to struggle with knowledge and to struggle in terms of the example you're giving in terms of taqwa. I found even amongst Westerners, they only appreciate a logical argument. As I said, I was speaking privately before to Sheikhu, and I was saying that I took some intellectual Westerners to some of the top shuyukh in the world, and they were very unimpressed, because what they wanted from the shuyukh was convincing intellectual arguments about spiritual matters. So this is what I think is what Ahmadu Bamba is teaching us, is how do you give da'wah in this time. Now, coming to the idea of maslahah, you see, it must be a Muslim, any scholar in any era, Ahmadu Bamba included, must adopt the idea of maslahah. That you must look at any situation, maslahah or mafsada is how you weigh things up. What is the benefit and what is the harm in doing something? That's the only way a Muslim looks at it. A Muslim, the hadith of the Prophet, you are not a believer is not stung from the same hole twice. In other words, he uses wisdom, he uses understanding, he looks at what's the benefit of this, what is the harm of this. So any fatwa that any alim who I've sat in front of has given has always been on the basis of maslahah or mafsada. That's the way a Muslim looks at it. What is the benefit and what is the harm? So, in Ahmadu Bamba's time, it was obviously of no benefit at all for people who are living, mainly in villages, to try to take on a French army which has modern weapons at their disposal. It was not possible to defeat this army in this way. What could be done, though, is Islam could have been, he established the basis for Islam to grow. For Islam to survive in Senegal and to grow and to create communities, functioning communities. Now, there are many great sheikhs in the past. There's Abdul Qadir Jilani, Imam al-Ghazali, and so on. But they didn't leave communities behind. Ahmadu Bamba left a functioning community behind. So that's one of the great achievements of Ahmadu Bamba, that a community of believers that was based on teaching Islam and establishing economically independent units, was a great innovation that Ahmadu Bamba left behind. That's how Islam survived in Senegal, I think. So yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's to answer your question. You can never look at any situation without the idea of maslahah. That has to be the basis of any understanding in any situation.
Thank you so much. So I had a sign coming from Sidi Njai. Sidi, do you want to open the floor to others to ask questions or to comment?
Maybe we can allow for one question. I know that Lamin Mbake have pinged me earlier for a question. Maybe let's open the mic for Lamin Mbake because the third panel is already checking in.
All right. So Sheikh Lamin, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Be in this panel, and I was very impressed with the work of Dr. Pirzada, and at the same time also with my cousin Serigne. I actually have a question and a comment. And the comment was, if I hear what Dr. Pirzada said and what Serigne said, it looks like the Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, who said Ujahid bil ulum wa bituqa, and like the professor said, he put the right strategy according to his time and the challenges facing his time. But I noticing that he was a mujaddid and his main mission was to imitate the Prophet. But regarding the community he left behind, I think the Sheikh told his community that the main purpose of the Murids war was to try to mirror the Sahabas. I think it's in the wall of saying he was even saying that the Sahabas are your fathers in Deen. Talking about non-violence, talking about work ethics, talking about successful economic behavior, talking about political influence. And actually, it's very interesting to me because I'm going to be presenting later on a presentation on Murīd economics, which I call Muridonomics, which I had the opportunity to introduce in 2017 at the United Nations, and which I'm working with an international university to publish a book maybe by 2021. But the bottom line here, I noticed in what you both said is Sheikh Ahmad Bamba's mission was to revive Islam and to spread Islam. And what we can learn from that while sticking to true Islamic teachings, while trying to imitate the Prophet, while trying to mirror the Sahabas from his community, I mean, you can find that there's a lot of benefits, regarding nonviolence, regarding work ethics, regarding political. So you can have a lot of scholars, I mean, pinpointing the advantages of his teaching, the success of the Murids in economy and nonviolence and everything. But the bottom line is his focus was on to reviving Islam and to imitate the Prophet. Which is to say that my personal conclusion, I don't know what your I think Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is an example of somebody who understood Islam more than anybody else, but who practiced also Islam more than anybody else. Because if you look at the Maqasid Sharias, if you look at the Maslahas, if Islam is perfectly practiced, you see a lot of advantages from that. I mean, from Islam, that a lot of conventional secular systems are looking for.
All right, thank you. Ahmad, so we'll give you last word. I think we're almost up.
Okay.
Our time is almost up. I'll give you the last word.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, Lamin, I'm actually a lecturer of economics in London. I lecture at London University. The point is that all of the ills that the Western economy suffers from, all of this riba-based system that they have, which is mainly to do with speculation, where 97% of the money is actually created by hitting a switch. Only 3% of money that they have in their economy is actually from government mints. So this situation where money has no real relation to reality, this is precisely what an Islamic economy will actually prevent from happening, where you have asset-backed finance. So very true. I'm very interested in Murīd economics. I wonder why you don't have a microeconomics project in Senegal. That's an excellent country where you give people small amount of loans. They can take a machine, sew clothes and sell them, for example. Exactly what was done in Bangladesh can be done in Senegal. I thought, when I looked at this country, I was there in 2018 for the Magal. I thought this is a great country for microfinance. Microfinance would be a wonderful project there. There are many things that can be done according to Ahmad Bamba's teachings. If he created dairas which were, planting groundnuts, I'm sure if he was here today, he would, be very high tech and deal with all the modern financial realities as they need to be dealt with. So yes, I think if you're writing a book on Murīd economics, that's a great thing, because Ahmad Bamba gives a very broad ability, a very broad-based brush for you to paint an economic picture from. So that's a great thing. I would love to see microfinance in the villages of Senegal. That would be a fantastic thing. I would love to see development happen in Senegal in that way. So I do think it's very important that we have our own economic ideas, because I think within our lifetime, we can see the crash of capitalism from what I'm seeing. Very quickly, this system can come to an end. And the IMF and other institutions are looking at Islamic economics. Christian Lagarde says something positive about it. The IMF have done many studies of Islamic economics, meaning that they realize their system could come to an end. Okay, I won't speak anymore because I think the next people are waiting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad Pirzada. Thank you so much, Serigne Shuaibu Kebe. And thank you so much those who join us today. I think you've learned a lot today, and I am confident that we will keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, and see you at another time. Bye-bye.
Barakallah fikum.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ آمنهم من قلي من بعد ما هذب بالتخلي زينبا وأمني بالخير والسلامة بأم كلثوم إلى القيامة وليجد ربي بحسن الخاتمة هنا وفي خد بجاه فاطمة صل على أبيهم والآل وصحبه وليستجب سؤالي وكن أنيسي واحمني من الضرر ونجني من اخترار وخرر وكن أنيسي واحمني من الضرر ونجني من اخترار وخرر ونجني ربي وأهل داري هنا وفي خد من الأكدار ونجني والمسلمين من بلاء والتق جسماني في قبر البلاء يا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا يا حبنا هب لي بجاه من هو المختار دنيا وأخرى خير ما أختار واجعل حجابا بيننا وبين كل أذى ولتكف عنا الحينا يا الله يا نسير يا جليل إني حقير معدم ذليل يا الله يا نسير يا جليل إني حقير معدم ذليل فلتغنني بك وهب لي الأرب بمن حلا جملة عجم وعرب سيدنا محمد باب الفلاح وسيلتي إليك في نيل الصلاح وصليا وسلما عليه وكل من قد انتمى إليه واغفر ذنوبي وتقبل حملي ولياب خير منى وأملي يا من حلا عن المكان والعرض إني ساكن هنا وبي مرض فكن أنيسي واشفني من السقم حتى أكون سالكا غير لقم يا عدل يا مذل يا من يؤمن أنت مجيري هنا يا مؤمن فأبدا كن مؤمني يا ذا الجلال من كل سوء وحذاب ودلال يا من على عن زوجة وعن ولد حدني وحد جميع أهل البلاد واجعل إلهي مسكني توبا أباد مثل اسمها بجاه خير من حبات وصليا عليه أفضل الصلاة وآله وصحبه ذوي الصلات وكل من قدمني أو سارا فنجه واغفر له أوزارا وكل من أحبني أو مالا إلي فارزقه هدى ومالا وكل من شتمني أو لاما فهب له التوبة واستسلاما فكل من أساء سنه بيا فليقلب قلبه يا ربي يا ولتكفني أذى جميع العالمين ولتكفهم أذاي يا ربي أمين ولتكفني أذى جميع العالمين ولتكفهم أذاي يا ربي أمين واجعل بنائي بناء حافية يجرني إلى خيور صافية واجعل بنائي بناء علمي وعمل بسنة وحلمي
I don't think that I saw it.
بنائي
Yeah.
بناء الاهتداء ولتكف عني كيد كل ذي اعتداء
We'll give them a few minutes to gather.
وحزبه الباقين
Okay, you
في
tell me whenever you
أوطاني
say what I should be.
ولتكف عني
All
كل
right.
شخص
It looks like you have an echo, so
وجهك فاصرف
everybody should be on mute.
عن ذي يرد ولتصرفا
Of
جملة
course,
ما
except the presenters, of course.
يدي وعن داري سريحا حيث حن ولتدخل المصلح في يدي وفي داري وثبتنه بالهادي الوفي وأعلني وأعل من يعينني ولتكفني جملة ما يهينني ومسكني سلم من الفجار وامن على الأهل بماء جاري واجعله يا ربي واجعله ربي مننا محجلا.
I know that we have a lot of excitement for this coming panel, so
واجعله ربي مننا محجلا.
we most likely will beat the record of attendance for this
يا
one.
حي يا قيوم كن لي مجيب.
No pressure, Jonathan.
أنت المجيب والكريم والرقيب.
I'm excited to share with everybody, and I'm seeing names of friends pop up as people are logging in, so this is nice.
Yeah, they all were looking forward to this one.
You're seeing and hearing me okay?
Yes.
So, Sidi, am I muted?
Not yet. You should mute yourself.
So how do I do this? Where should I go?
Scroll down with your cursor and something will come up. Okay, you're good. Everybody else should be muted on this call, please. And no cameras, please, except for the presenters.
والتقنا شر النصارى واليهود وشر إبليس وكل
Professor Diouf, can you try your mic so that I can make sure that we hear you well?
في الشرق والمغرب والبيدان.
Perfect.
وسر ما في الأرض طرا والسماء من ظاهر وباطن اكتتما. أيا لطيف يا كريم يا جليل حامل جميعنا بلطفك الجميل وكلنا قل نجاة وفلاح ووفقنا لصواب وصلاح ولتخرنا بفعل ما أحببت ولتكفنا عن فعل ما أبغضت ولا تكن مبتليا منا أحد دهرا بما ليس يطيق.
You have the floor, Professor.
وهب لنا التيسير والفلاح.
Okay, thank you very much, Sidi. But I would like first to say
بجاه ذا اليوم
thank
وجاه
the
مولد
organizers of this
فيه فرنا
wonderful
مثله
panels
ولم نجد.
for
بجاه ذا اليوم
actually
وجاه
inviting me to
مولد
take part
فيه
on that.
فرنا
I
مثله
have
ولم
followed
نجد.
the two previous
محمد
panels,
أفضل
and I
خلق
think this
الله
one, which is
بلا
exploring the future of
تردد
the
ولا
Murīd
اشتباه.
in the
عليه
US, and
صل
in
أبدا
particular
خير
paying a lot of
صلاة
attention to
بها
Ndawi
نرافق
Touba
الخيار
movement.
والثقات.
Movement of Touba is
وهب
really
لنا أرض
fitting.
الذي
This discussion is
آتانا
a follow-up of the
وترك ما
discussion
عن
because
فعله
it's about looking
نهانا
at
حتى
what are the
يكون
lessons
كلنا
of
في
Ahmadu
الحركات
Bamba and how we are
مقتديا
carrying it
بسنة
and carrying it in
والسكنات.
particular
حتى
in a
يكون
space which
كلنا
is
في
different from the
الحركات
space in
مقتديا
which not
بسنة
only it's merged,
والسكنات.
but the space
ونجنا
in which
بجاهه من دعوى
it's developed.
ولتكفي
So what
عنا
the panel
كذبا
is going to
ولهوا
interrogate
ولتكفنا
is
الهوى
the
وما لا يعني
intersectional
وبك
dimensions of
دأبا أغننا يا
immigration,
مغني.
African
يا الله
ethnicity and
مغفرتك
identity,
المؤملة
blackness and
أوسع
religion.
من ذنوب عاص
And it's
مهولة.
about really
يا
how
بر رحمتك
religiosity
أرجى عندنا
and what people
من
have
حمل
learned,
نكسبه
in
فاغفر
particular
لنا
parents, are
ولجميع
traveling
المسلمين
and
أجمعين
how it is shaping
والمسلمات
the
كلهن
identity
كل
of
حين.
which second
ولا
generation,
تواخذنا بسوء
not only
الأدب
Murids, but of
وبالتجرؤ
West
وكسر
Africa.
اللعب.
It's about home, it's about
فإننا
ethnicity,
وإن
it is
تجرأنا
it's
فلا
about
نرجو
religion. So,
سواك
and the
كلنا
presentation will
تفضلا.
be given by
ولا
Jonathan
تواخذنا
Bowman, who's
بكثرة
a PhD
الفضول
candidate
في
from
ظاهر وبات
Middlesex
وبالخفول.
University in London.
وكن
And
معيذنا من
I think that we'll
الوباء
have also
وكل
the
ناسل.
presentation and comment by Mohammed Galayai and by Hadim Busso. And after that, we'll open the discussion. So what I would like to do is to give the floor to Jonathan to give his presentation. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Well, assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everyone, everywhere. I really want to thank all the organizers for inviting me to participate in celebrating Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Day in North America. Great privilege. I'm also just want to greet the esteemed members of this panel, and I really look forward to your contributions. Before I begin, just a few words about myself. Many of you know me. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I work as a consultant for Christian-Muslim relations. From 1999 to 2009, I lived and worked in Senegal. More recently, I've done my research in Harlem. I just want to say thank you to all the people that helped me, housed me, fed me, answered my questions, and made me feel really welcome. I love the New York Murīd community. And on the subject of this, this particular panel, I would say right off the top, the future is bright for Murids. And so my presentation really is going to come in that light. The Ndawi Serigne Touba Facebook page says they are a religious organization aimed at spreading the work of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, Khadimur Rasul, through events, community support, community service, and peer support. The president of NST described their mission to me as Ndawi to lost African youth, and that they would find a way to become useful, productive citizens by following the example of Bamba. NST really burst onto the scene in New York in the 2017 Bamba Day parade when they wore matching uniforms and served the community. And I'm having trouble with my notes. And now means either youth or ambassador. And in the case of NST, they're quite deliberately meaning both. They're young ambassadors of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Calling themselves youth, they position themselves in society, and really it's about leading a counter discourse. Living in the diaspora, they experience freedoms that they would not have in Senegal, and they escape some of the control of family and society structures and live in a new geography. I'm quoting Dr. Juf. In America, they're Murids by choice, and they describe themselves as sometimes being victims of racism and violence. At the same time, they're positioning themselves in their local context and attempting to lead a counter discourse about being young Muslims in America. Many of NST members are elites with American college degrees. Oh my, I'm having so much trouble with this mouse. Pardon me. Yes, my mouse was giving me trouble. NST was birthed out of intergenerational tensions, and the idea of youth as a social shifters might clarify the situation of NST and their context within the Muridiyya and the larger society of New York. They're aware of power differences between them and their elders, between them and Mika, between themselves and American society. And they're creating ways to tip that imbalance just a bit in their favor. They do this by being the best Murids they know how, serving to the greatest extent, and winning a place for themselves. By creating a youth movement with enough momentum and energy, they gained attention from Sheikh Mamour, and they've moved themselves as youth from being undesired to desired. So I'm going to talk a lot about the kind of shifts that they've created. And by seeing them as social shifters, it's a kind of a powerful analytic tool to interrogate the ways that they point out imbalances and bring awareness to things hidden. They're situated in a very dynamic context, and their position allows them to see opportunities that the first generation of Murids may not have seen. They're ready to cross boundaries and mediate contradictions about being Sufi Muslim youth in a pluralistic and non-religious world. I could talk a lot about transnationality and locality. It's present throughout this discussion, but I'll just note that NST is a transnational religious organization, but they're locally rooted in Harlem. So issues of transnationality and locality are sharply in play. Tensions between Touba and Harlem, between Senegalese Wolof cultural forces and American cultural pluralistic realities of Harlem are shaping Murīd youth. NST is a daira, and Momar Kumba Diop described 3 purposes for the daira: to serve the needs of the sheikh, to serve the needs of the talibé, and to promote Murīd ideology. So using these 3 categories, I'm going to look briefly at NST. First, the needs of the sheikh. The daira helps this communication happen. Understanding the sheikh-talibé relationship is important to understanding NST. This is completely on display, say at the JFK International Airport, where NST members joined other Murids to welcome Sheikh Ma'mur, and who's also had multiple private meetings with them. The second role of the daira is to meet the needs of the talibé, who live scattered across the city in an often hostile environment. For young Murids in New York, the daira offers community and belonging. For many members, NST is the primary circle of relationship and belonging in New York. They place a high value on helping newcomers get started in the community by sharing food and housing and many other things. They create a Murīd space, a place of belonging and safety and security, which I've discovered in my own research is probably one of the more significant things. This communal space where you feel secure, you know what your identity is, becomes a social mechanism for peacemaking, because it's out of that security that you have the ability to then relate to the religious other or the non-religious other. A third function of the daira is to promote Murīd ideology, and NST members express this in 3 primary ways, I would say: khidma, dawah, and living the Yonu Jam. Yonu Jam I translate in my research to mean nonviolence or path of peace. First, khidma. This is the most visible element of NST. You see them serving the community at events, organizing, cleaning up, preparing food. And as you know, service to one's sheikh and service to one's family and fellow Murids and society is really the essence of being a Murid, because by doing that service, you're serving khidmatul khadim, and thus you're in the service of the Prophet. So NST has focused a lot of its activity in that realm. Sociologically speaking, you could say that NST members are using their bodies as weapons or tools. By dressing in matching uniforms, they insert themselves into the middle of the most important events in the Murid community, Bamba Day, the Magal, and this causes everyone to recognize them and value them as ambassadors of Serigne Touba. Dawah. NST carries a strong sense of dawah, and I've experienced a warm, compelling invitation to become a Muslim every time I was with them, to join NST, join the Murids in New York. Their president described dawah as their first and foremost mission to lost Senegalese, but including all people, Muslim and non-Muslim. He said, we have an example of the forgiveness of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, whose example shows us how we should live, and so we desire to share that with others. It appears to me that their commitment to dawah is stronger in NST than in Mika Murid community in general. NST members adhere to Murid tradition, and at the same time they bring a critique. They believe that as a new generation with different opportunities, education, the benefit of their parents' work, they can take the Muridiyya to new levels of success. So dawah and conversion are core parts of NST's mission. And I would say they feel that the older generation has not understood or integrated into the American context sufficiently to have such an effective witness. And nonviolence. A third way that NST promotes Murid ideology is the way they live Yonu Jam. Nonviolence is an essential part of Murīd ideology, and in New York, a chosen public identity for the New York diaspora. It makes a lot of sense in the context of New York and the American situation. During Ramadan 2018, an NST member was shot in the stomach just outside Daraji on 116th Street. This event and the way people talked about it has been very instructive to me. I got to see how people wrestle with a violent event as faithful Muslims and as faithful disciples of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. The victim emphasized that he was trying to calm people down, trying to stop a fight. He got shot, but that was something God allowed to happen. So that kind of removes the need to blame or seek revenge. And the communal response to this act of violence appears to have been to trust that the police will do their jobs and to pronounce forgiveness, calling on the example of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And additionally, in the community meetings I've seen and the talk I've had with many people I've interviewed about this, the question isn't so much about who was this person or why did they commit this act of violence, but it's much more an internal question. Why? How could have our young people got in such a troubling situation, and how could we get them to join NST? So Murids of NST members, in Harlem are living into this narrative of being nonviolent Muslims with a witness to offer to others. How would I define an American Murid? It's like, how would you define an American Christian? And in one sense, I want to say, well, we are purely Christian. That's separate from being American. But the reality is, when I travel to other countries, I meet Christians in Africa, and they behave and act differently than I do. And so when I say American Murid, I'm saying it's not something about changing Islam in its core, but it's how do American Murids live that's different than maybe their brothers and sisters in Senegal. So the emergence of an American Muridiyya is not what I was expecting to find when I did my research in Harlem. I was really just looking for Senegalese people living in New York City, and maybe how they remain true to their origins. Young Murids in NST with a portion of their education in Senegal and another port in the United States know that they're no longer immigrants, no longer migrants. They want to and intend to make their life in New York, Atlanta, or Columbus. They're Americans. And as Murids, Touba's still their permanent cardinal north of the spiritual compass, but their everyday concerns are oriented towards life and work in New York City, not Senegal. So I characterize American Murids as those who are American citizens by birth or naturalization, who went to high school or university in the States and are fluent in English. These American Murids thrive in a transnational space that's oriented spiritually towards Touba, but settled in America. They're 100% committed to Bamba. They possess the ritual mastery and skills needed to transform and adapt Murid ritual to American context. They carry a very strong JN, Sheikh Abdullah J. They carry quite an influence from him in terms of how they approach their religious life in America. They want to make Bamba known everywhere, share his spiritual and ethical philosophy. They engage in khidma, dawah, and peacemaking. So to conclude, NST has chosen to work from within the Murid community, to utilize traditional Murid structures and rituals, faithfully adhering to the teachings and practice of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. There are challenges and growing pains ahead, but it's clear that these young ambassadors of Serigne Touba are shifting the position of Murid youth in Harlem and beyond. Their clothing, their use of religious objects to announce their presence to all. They use their bodies to serve their community and to claim contested spaces. In all these activities, they call attention to things they would like to change, things they think could be done better. Young ambassadors of Serigne Touba have shifted both their position in the community and the community of itself. They've moved from being non-participants to participants, from no leadership to leading and founding their own new daira. They've changed dynamics about how, Sheikh Mamour, when he comes to New York, he doesn't just meet with the older traditional dairas. Now he's meeting with the youth as well. They've moved from being unofficial to official. They have a 501c3 organization, and they're pressing into a much more aggressive and strong invitation to Islam and to being Murīd. Any visitor in the community will experience that. The young ambassadors of Serigne Touba continue to hold to Murīd commitments to peace and nonviolence. And the ways they live and express this commitment to nonviolence is a strong element of their life as Murids. They're participating in the Murīd witness that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was a Muslim peacemaker. But this rests in somewhat of a tension with their strong call to dawah. And how will they balance this peacemaking and a rather aggressive, sometimes aggressive witness? So Murīd youth in New York are seizing their place in the larger New York diaspora. They're youth who are negotiating what it means to be faithful Muslims, faithful Murids, and Americans. Their ancestors shaped most of the last 40 years of the Murīd presence in New York, and now they're going to shape the next season. Thank you, and I turn it back to you, Dr. Juf.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So he has presented a very rich paper, which is a kind of sociology, but also an understanding of the emergence of what he called, an American Muridia, and has actually signaled very precisely the manifestation of such an identity, which is a new identity in the space, which is in particular the space of Harlem. So what I would like to do now is to ask, I don't know if he's around, Mohamed Galainyai, to comment if he's connected. I haven't seen his name.
Professor Galai is not on, but you can invite Dr. Hadim
Busso. Absolutely. I was doing that. If Galai is not around, I will ask Dr. Hadim Busso, who is a member of the Murīd Islamic Community of America, MICA, to give us his presentation and comments. So you have a floor, Hadim Busso.
Yeah, I also don't see him in the group. Let's see if Binta Job is on the call. Looks like she's also not on.
They both here. They both here. They just have their device mute right now, but they are both here.
Okay, thank you. Can you unmute, please?
To unmute. So CD, what do you suggest? What do we do?
We can proceed with question.
Okay, I think we can begin with question. What I would like to say in order to set the stage very quickly is that Jonathan, the main idea of Jonathan is to postulate that, an American Muridia exists. And one thing which is interesting, if you compare what he is doing looking at the NST and what had been done years ago, the scholarship on Murīd migrants, and Sheikh Babu was part of the important contributor to the discussion, is we are seeing a shift. Is that we are seeing a shift where Sheikh and many of the scholars of his generation has paid attention to is people who had been mainly quote unquote not non-educated workers. These were mainly traders. The shift you are introducing.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Dr. Youth is muted.
Dr. Diouf, you can proceed.
No. Okay.
You can go ahead, Khadim.
If Sin Khadim is talking, he's muted. I'm sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Oh, okay. Can I start? I hope the host is hearing me. Assalamu alaikum.
Who would like to intervene?
Alaikum salam. You lay dig Singh Khadim. Yeah, we hear you very clear.
Okay, is Khadim Buso
okay.
around?
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a floor.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On behalf of the Murīd Islamic community in America, warmest greetings to all participants and members of this panel. Expression of great gratitude also to the organizers of this conference for the opportunity offered to meet and discuss about the various objectives, particularly the present and future of Muridia and the diaspora. I thank you, Jonathan, because of the topic that he chose, and we really appreciate what he said. Talking about Ndawi Serigne Touba should not be a brief presentation topic, especially for social sciences and studies, urban youth movement for social change and religious revival in this particular case of NST. I will highlight their points as contribution. The important role that NST must play in the growth and spreading of the peaceful and motivation message of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba any group within the Muridia, especially newly founded organization, regardless of its location, should undergo the appropriation process of all fundamental. Most of these young men and women involved with NST are second or third generation American-born Murīd citizen. They are reading themselves as every good citizen to serve their community, because they was born American citizen. This opportunity, our grandfathers doesn't have this. They don't have this opportunity to born American and speaking the language. They don't have any trouble for the language. The reason that can help them to bring the American people don't care about white people, black people, or young people or old people. Only the teaching of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. We have to show this to American people, to bring them, to take them from their community to our community, and help people to understand the teaching of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. That is peace and love that we learn from Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Khadim Rasul. This is what I want to participate for the first time. Thank you.
Dr. Juf, your mic is muted. You got to unmute it.
So thank you very much for Hadim Bousso for your intervention and your presentation of the mission of the NST. I don't know if our colleague Galanya is around.
Actually, Binta Job is here. Binta, can you unmute? And
she was here, yeah.
Yeah, she's right here. Yeah, just unmute. And please, for all those that are attending, turn your camera off, and please do not unmute your phone or mic until you were given the floor. As a participant, meeting the. If you don't mute your phone, we will just remove you from the call. But please mute and shut your camera off. Binta Job, you can go ahead. You have to unmute. You're still muted.
Hello,
okay,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you are fine.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. On behalf of NST, my name is Binta Job, and I am a founding member of the Ndawi Serigne Touba. Today I bring greetings from our Jawrin Serigne Josimbai, the board of director of Jawrin of Ndawi Serigne Touba, but also from all the Muslim Murīd youth living in the United States of America. So much for such a wonderful, a great discourse and a great, presentation about the Ndawi Serigne Touba. I strongly believe that this is quite honestly the greatest gift we can give to a youth movement, especially putting it in writing, but also giving us such details about how we came about as young Murids. As you were speaking, I think one thing that really caught my attention was the fact that you did mention that the Ndawi Serigne Touba did have an identity that was transnational, but also the pluralism that we could see in our movement. I can tell you that the beginning, our movement mentioned that so beautifully in your article. We came about really out of a need. This is something that was bigger than ourselves. I think the time where on July 23rd, 2017, when we met at the Central Park, Morningside Park for our barbecue, it was our soul yearning to be in touch with Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. I think the time is very small for me to elaborate on how we were able to display our thirst for the Murīd Tariqa here in the United States. But I also wanted to really mention that NST, the Ndawi Serigne Touba, has a very particular side that I'm inviting everyone to pay attention to. And that's the platform that Ndawi Serigne Touba for the Muslim woman herself. With our community, with our organization, very early on given a platform to the woman in our society. We were part of the board membership. We were part of the decision making. But another aspect of NST is the social aspect of NST, where NST became a safe place, not just for peacemaking. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Amba is the pinnacle of the embodiment of peace all over the world. However, we were able to embody that through our activities. And the example you gave with that man being shot is how we are living that peace on a daily basis. Our attention to the way that we are forming new lives. In NST, we see that with our activities, we were able to decrease like unmarital interrelationship, if you will say. In NST, we were very successful into making the young people meet and get married and build the health. Within NST as well, we were able to build models. I need to remind, I am compelled right now to remind everyone that NST is really a model and a good service, not only for Senegalese Murids, but for American, because most of our the youngest may be around 12, the oldest you may see somewhere old. However, most of them are US citizens. These are the future leaders of America. And having the principles and the teachings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in the 20th century, right now with the world where Black Lives Matter, we are struggling for Black men. We are struggling to end the violence in New York. We are struggling to find a meaningful way to work. NST came through as an answer, and not only for the Murid community, but for the world as a whole. And I'm very grateful that we were able to support our progress through the article that Mr. Jonathan did with the help of MICA, the Murid Islamic community in America. I think before I ended to say that, yes, we do have concern within and its concern is really to have the resource. But our Jorin, which is Serigne Josimbaye, along with the board, shown the way. And the way that NST operates is really the words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, where he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So what we did is we took lines and we started creating avenues of development even before anybody got involved. Blessing for us to see that the minute we rose up, the elders came and gave us their stamp of approval. The minute we got up, we were able to see that Sheikh Serigne Mamour came and gave us his stamp of approval. So now NST is into a bigger platform. Sure, in the future of Muridism, according to us and into our own eyes, is how can we develop the Murid exponentially? How can we make Muridism in America which is creating an international university where all youth can identify in there and be able to do the true sense of khidmah, which is learning the westernized way of education, but applying also the teaching of the Sheikh and creating that bridge. Something part of both teachings. Another of our future endeavors also has to do with really creating safe spaces. I think, Mr. Jonathan, you touch upon that a little bit by saying that when we have the dara and we create that safe place for people, it's a means for us to create better peace. That at this time, NST definitely needs more of those safe spaces. I think one of our challenge is really how can we recognize that NST, most of our members are American citizens, and how can we make reservations for those US citizens, for those Americans, so that they can benefit from, like, let's say, like recreational centers, places where they can stay so that they can live the true identity of who they were born to We want to monopolize the discussion, but we are extremely grateful for this opportunity. We do thank Mika for this opportunity, for the support that we have received. Serigne, Mr. Diouf, thank you so much for having us. And Mr. Jonathan, again, we are extremely appreciative. On behalf of all the members of the Ndawi Serigne Touba, we are thankful and we say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we pray for our Sheikh Serigne Muntaha for long life for him, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much, Peter Job. I think that you added to Jonathan's presentation and you engage with some of the issues he raised. In particular, I think you gave us a kind of very powerful picture of the mission, NST members assign themselves. And again, the question you are raising, which resonates very well with what Jonathan was saying, is how do you inscribe Murīd resources in a landscape where you have other groups, other values, other religious understanding? And in particular, what you insisted on is about a kind of American citizenship, which is informed by a tradition which is not a Western tradition, by a Muslim tradition which is also different from, quote unquote, the kind of global Muslim tradition. And I think that it's an important discussion to have also beyond the Murīd community, because it's not, as you say, only about the Muslim community. It's about West Africans, it's about Muslims, it's about making the lesson of Ahmadou Bamba important and more important in the world scene. But one thing you intersect, the three of you, is your insistence on peace. And my question is, why such an insistence on peace? Because peace is but one aspect of Ahmadou Bamba's teaching. It's not the whole teaching of Bamba. Again, Sheikh Babu insists much more on the pedagogical aspect and think that it is the heart of Ahmadou Bamba's intervention. I think these are questions around which we could open the floor and give the possibility of our colleagues to intervene before going back to Jonathan. So the floor.
You are on mute, Dr. Diouf, you are on mute.
I was saying one way of manifesting your desire to intervene, if you go to participant, you have an icon, which is a hand. And if you raise your hand, I can actually find you and give you the floor.
Yeah, or open your camera and then we'll give it to you.
So if nobody wants to talk, Jonathan, you have back the floor to react to many of the questions we talked about.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated the presentation from Serigne Khadim Bousso and from Binta Diop. Both of you, your contributions really added to what I had already shared. The question, why peace? Why did we all focus on peace? Very, very important, because in Senegal, peacemaking and nonviolence would not be a major emphasis of Murids. However, living in post 9/11 New York City, I believe Murids had to find a way to make themselves fit into an American society that was suddenly very hostile towards Islam and hostile towards Muslims. And they dug into their tradition and they find that they actually have a very powerful, long-standing witness about nonviolence from their founder. So embracing it makes perfect sense. And the other thing I want to say about Binta, your presentation, I also am very impressed at the role that women have played in NST. I've interviewed some of the women. I've seen your contributions, and so that's a very unique thing you bring as a daira and as a space for women to present themselves to and their gifts to the world. Might I add one more thing before I pass the mic over, and that is to say, I really have enjoyed researching the NST. Wow. Because you actually do have a contribution to make to American society. So you're gifted with two cultural heritages, and you're well-educated people. And right now, American society has a lot of questions about whether or not immigrants are welcome, whether or not they have an important role to play. And so highlighting something like peace and nonviolence, highlighting a Muslim group that has a place for women in leadership, means that you have a very attractive and interesting contribution to make to the larger American society. I'll stop there.
Hadim, you would like to say something? Yeah, you have the floor. Unmute. Unmute. Hadim.
Okay, I'm here. I'm sorry, because the first time I was speaking, I just thanked. I thought I have only 5 minutes. The reason why I made it so shortly, but I have something else to say. I was saying that the message of Sir Ahmadu Bamba is universal. The nationality of the founder of the Murīd is universal, as the message of Islam in his many writing and teaching lessons. Like he say, "Inni ukhatibun nasara turran fi ardihim." I will speak to them in their own land. I will explain them the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the message of Allah is peace and love. One of the reasons why when Sir Ahmad Bamba returned from the exile to his land, he said, I forgive everybody, because I don't want to do wrong to people. The reason why we are, as a Murīd in Harlem, we bring peace to the community. Even the white American and the black American and the African American, they know that the message of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is peace and love and gathering together and make the things clear and nicer and call people to Islam nicely. Don't do wrong to people. Even they are not Muslim, you have to respect them, to give them respect, to call them to Islam. The reason why, one of the reasons, most of people or many people, they every day returning to Islam, following the teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba by the Ndawi, by the Sheikh of Serigne Touba, Ndawi Serigne Touba. One of the reasons the Murīd Dawa is right now is the most Dawa, the real Dawa of Islam, because it's calling people to practice Islam by peace and love. This is what I was wondering to add again, and to remind the Ndawi Serigne Touba that what I mentioned before. Firstly, they are lucky because they was born Muslims and they was born American citizens, so they don't have a language problem. They don't have anything they don't have excuse to presenting and explaining the teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. So they have to work hardly to bring people to Islam, but by peace and love, as I mentioned before. This is what I was wondering to add to my presentation lately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, Sincere. Well, yeah, I think I have a question for Mr. Jonathan, but before I proceed, I think it's very important for also to share the support that we've received from Serigne Khadim Bousso, who was an imam in New York at the time where we were when we were organizing, and also the elders of the community. So I just wanted to mention that before I proceed because I forgot. But for Mr. Jonathan, I have a question, and my question has to do with what sparked the interest of your study for NST. In what sense did you see us different from other youth movements, Islamic youth movements per se? You know, there are so many varieties of youth movements in the United States, you know, that are Muslim. But what makes the particularity of NST in your eyes?
Me too. I have a question to Mr. Jonathan.
So I was doing research on the Murīd community, doing research on nonviolence, asking whether or not there are Muslims who practice nonviolence. And just simply, I was doing that research starting in 2016. So NST was created and came into being in the middle of my fieldwork. And I had the blessing of meeting some of the leaders early on. And then you all, like you and many others, welcomed me into your midst. And I found you living out what your tariqa says you should do. And so it made it interesting to focus on you.
Great, thank you.
Simple answer.
Mr. Jonathan?
Mr. Bousso.
Sure.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Jonathan. I say hi again.
Hey, brother.
Okay, yeah.
It's been so long.
My follow-up question is, what do you think in the future, what we can do, as you mentioned before, to say Bamba everywhere? And what do you think is the meaning of Bamba everywhere? What do you think is the meaning of that? Because what I think is the meaning is to bring the teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba to the communities. But it's not only by the name, Bamba everywhere by the name only. What do you think about that? That's my question.
Yeah, well, you know, so myself, you know, as a dedicated Christian, I want Jesus to be known everywhere, right? But obviously almost everybody in the world's already heard that name. So I don't just mean the name, right? I want to see people living and acting the way he wants them to act. So when I hear in the Murīd community, when I hear people saying Bamba fi, Bamba fe, Bamba fip,
yes,
or quoting the verse from his poetry that you quoted, that they'll hear his teaching in their own language. My understanding is that Bamba everywhere, when NST members are saying that, is just very simply that many people would benefit from his teaching and follow his teaching about what it means to be a healthy, good person, a person in right relationship with God. I think that's what you mean, but you guys have to tell me because I'm just listening.
That's what I mean. That's
I also think that what Khadim Bousso is raising is a sociological moment we have to pay attention to. The case of the universality of Bamba is a new phenomenon, which is mostly attached to two waves of migrants. The first wave is the wave of Murīd settling in Senegalese cities, African cities. And the second wave is the Murīd diaspora all over the world. And this created a shift. In the early phase, and all the literature in that period shows it, the Murīd tried to specifically stay in Bawol and Kayor. They didn't want to go outside. And it was a kind of very powerful local ideology. And Islam, which pays attention to something which is local. This is the first. And, you know, again, you see the literature, you see it. The second wave, the wave of universality, it's a moment where what Adi Busso was saying, Bamba everywhere becomes a slogan. You know, one of my colleagues did this wonderful exhibit, which is called Scent in the City, which is about the presence of Bamba and Bamba's images in Dakar. It was done by Richard Roberts. And one thing which is fascinating is, and this is still the problem, I think, even among the MST, the tension between, on one hand, universalism being present outside, and the other tension, which is the tension of retaining identity, which is specific. And the specificity of the identity is what you show, the way in which people are dressing, the way in which the body is signaling who you are. I think these are very important. It's why I was asking the question about why peace. Why not race? Because race is as important as peace in Bamba's approach. And in a country like the US, where racialization is institutionalized, this could be a narrative to deal with the integration of young Murīd in this space. And it's why I think we need to pay more attention to the environment, because it's three elements in the environment: the wider American society, the African American society, and the Muslim groups in the US. And the Murīd MST will have to deal with that, these two groups, and how dealing with these two groups allow them to shape, because it's about that, to shape an identity which is effective. Not only here, because they are supposed also to maintain the relation with Senegal, to a relation with Touba. So these are problems which are very, very important. And I'm sure that the MST is dealing with, because it's about producing a new culture which is informed by Bamba's lessons. It's not about using it only. It's about adjusting it to a different environment. So these are the questions for me which are important. You raise, Hadim and Binta raise, but these are critical questions, you know, which will change necessarily the structure of, you know, engaging with that. And I think these are very important issues to discuss. I can discuss it, of course, because I am not a Murīd. I am not a Murīd, and I was born in a colonial city. So, but I have written.
But thank you for your nice witness.
Yeah, and I have written in the early phase. You know, I wrote a paper.
And also the real Murīd is the real Muslim. The Murīd is the real Muslim. One of the reasons why Serigne Touba doesn't call people to a tariqa, he called them to Islam. He say, Allah say, when you call people to Islam, that means when they are Murīd, that means they are Muslims. If you are Muslim, you're Murīd. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's just about what kind of question,
I understand,
which kind of conversation we can have. And again, it's going back to the idea of the possibility of the emergence of an American Murīd identity, which is also what historians are discussing. Can we talk about an American African community different from the African American community? It's also a debate, and what it means is very, very important. Today, you know, Indian scholars are saying that Indian community back in India is reimagining himself, borrowing idea from the Indian diaspora. This is also something which is possible. So what does it mean? What are the resources used? How they are used and received in the community is important. Again, what I was saying is what I have studied, the period I have studied about the Murids, what I am actually defending is the idea that Murid cosmopolitanism is borrowing from Murid resources, not from global resources. Jonathan is saying, looking at the NST, that something new is appearing, which is much more linked to the West and the presence in the West than borrowing from, Bowel traditions. So this is also something important to deal with.
Yes, Mr. Juf, if I may intervene, if I'm being heard right now, you touched on a very important, and I'm thankful for mentioning that. I think with the Bamba Everywhere, my understanding of it really as a young Murid is really the universality of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's message, really. Because if you look at his writings, such as Sindi, if you look at the writings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, where he says, Irham Jamiyar Wara, that universe has been taught by us, by our Sheikh himself. So he made reference to the Torah, he made reference to the Injil, he made reference to all the books. So us as being true to the teachings of our Sheikh, we could no longer help but to bring the message everywhere, because that's the point of view of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba as he was writing. Now, NST is an organization worldwide. We have people that are requesting to be a member in Saudi Arabia, in China, in Senegal. We have even non-Muslims that are part of sympathizing with our message. And I think what it shows over there is really shows that we were born within that context. And when it comes to our relationship with the Western world, my complete view about that is it's nothing new to us. And Alhamdulillah, I think we were able to beautifully highlight the two different, if we can call it that, which is two different lifestyles, which is the Murid lifestyle and the American lifestyle. But us being conscious and being here in the United States, in our mind, it's one and it always has been the same. And the reading I had that is just the situation where I saw our Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, as we know him, completely lived with the Western man and the colonialists. All his writings, when you see, he's walking constantly in being accompanied by the Western man. So that is not a foreign concept for us. It's not a foreign concept for him to be in a foreign land and have to identify himself as a Muslim and as a Murid. So I think it's a continuation. Even now, it's just a different land for us, but the concept itself is not foreign. Even in Senegal, we do the same battle, where in Dakar, in a foreign land per se, because our teachings are not completely being implemented in Dakar. However, when we go to Touba, you can see us really fully embody the teachings of our Sheikh. So that lifestyle and the geography where we are, yes, it is something we can pay attention of, but consciously, wherever we go is Touba for us. Wherever we go, we are Murid, regardless of the situation. I think the real question, and probably Mr. Jonathan can help me answer that, is how can we get an awareness? How can we raise awareness of our situation as Murids? How can we be respected just being Murid citizens, Murid Americans, and not being seen as a different vague of people, a different kind of people? How can we be here and fully live our Muridism without being labeled or per se another type of American? Maybe he can help us find ways where we can be fully integrated within the American life and be recognized as such, inshallah.
I know that we are
we are
past.
going to But this is a good question, but it's not Jonathan. You have to read Sheikh Babu.
Yeah,
You read
absolutely.
Sheikh Babu.
Yeah,
You will find responses to your questions. Sheikh Babu has written on that. And Senegalese scholars has widely written on how Murids, the Murid diaspora, adjust to different situations. And one comparison which could be very interesting is a book which was published in 1995 by an African-American anthropologist. It's called States of Grace, which is about the Murids in Italy. And he's already raising all the questions you are raising about this Muslim elite reinventing an identity. But if you are too young to remember, in the 90s, the Khalif General Abdullah Mbake decided to ban the Fédération des étudiants Mourides en Europe. And the discussion was against the tension between what is universal and what is local in the lesson of Bamba's. The attempt to make Bamba's lesson universal and rethink the lessons was a very important thing, and it's created a crisis. This is also something. So you have a long history in which many of the questions you are raising are being raised and debated within, the Murid community and outside the Murid communities by scholars from all over the world. You know, the Murids are probably the most studied group in the sociology, anthropology, and history of Senegalese sociology group. You have a huge library about that. And it's important to go back and revisit them and try to have a sense of how, I'm not saying that they are saying, some are saying things which are good, some are saying things which are, but it exists and it's need to be revisited. Jonathan.
Doctor, maybe before Jonathan go ask that question, we have few people that want to ask questions. Before that, I'm going to read a question that came through. How do we unite African American communities and the Senegalese Murid community? Hold that thought, and then let's have Code the file, open your mic and ask your question. Really very short question. If it's a commentary, don't open your mic. Go ahead.
So I can comment only briefly on that to say that in my research, I realized that there are fewer African Americans involved in the Murid community today than there were in the past. So if I look at the research other people did, I look at the documents, I see that there are fewer African Americans today. It probably has something to do with the leadership of Muhammad Baluzi, Alhaji Baluji. His leadership was a very strong tie to the African American community. With his death, I think there was a real loss. How to re-bridge that gap, I don't know, but that certainly would be a challenge for you all.
I think I would just like to add that intellectually it's something which is being bridged. One of the best today's African-American scholars of African history is an African-American who's called, his name is Butch War. And his next book is actually a translation of Ahmadou Bamba's poems. And he has written a great book which is called The Walking Islam, which is a history of Muslim education in the last 1,000 years.
The Walking Quran. Yeah.
That was published 5 years ago.
We did invite him, but he's traveling currently. That's why he didn't join. You can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation and for this panel. Actually, this is Marco Defal. So I'm a PhD student here at the University of Florida. So I also do some research on the Murīd, basically on the Dahiras. But one question I have is going to be online with what Professor Duke is saying, and it's about basically why the emphasis on this transnational? Because if you take a look at Sheikh Anta Babu's article, Urbanizing Mystical Islam, so he's giving you a reason for the establishment of urban dahiras in Dakar. And those reasons we had like the marginalization, so of Murids in Dakar before the 60s. And then you have, some other reason like basically preventing them from organizing, any kind of event in Dakar. So in this transnational space, so I see more or less, it's not like the same context. Murids are not kind of experiencing marginalization, if I may say so, because this context is quite open and, they have certain freedom, certain liberty to organize, to be in groups. Mika is right here. So they have this label as being a non-profit organization. So that is kind of giving them some leverage. So, what do you see in terms of pedagogy that makes maybe, because the roots is still in Senegal. So I don't see the roots of NST located here. So the roots are basically in the daras, in rural daras. So you have this, let's say, relationship between rural, urban, and from the urban to maybe, transnational. So how do you see the display, beside the symbols and the invocation and the emphasis on the khidma? Where do you fit in this pedagogical aspect in the day-to-day experience and action? Thank you.
You need to unmute, Jonathan. I muted you because you have an echo. Go ahead.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for your question. I'm not entirely sure I understood all the aspects of your question, but the shortest answer to the question, what is religious transnationality, is that when people move, they take their religion with them. And so, yes, Murids draw their everything straight from Touba, but they live in New York, they live in Atlanta, they live in Rome. And like it or not, locality begins to press upon people and assert itself into their lives, and they're transformed by that experience. And so today you have a dynamic situation where there's strong and healthy Murid communities in many places in the world, communicating with each other. So things that happen in New York are quickly reported in Jurbel and vice versa. So there's a real flow of information and ideas and practices back and forth. So, I heard Murids in New York chanting, Bamba owns New York. Well, after some research and conversations, I realized people are also chanting that in Dakar and Chess. So this is a very dynamic field of sociology and faith and the local situation impressing itself upon Murids wherever they're at.
Thank you. Do you have any other question or comments?
Yeah, we have Lamin Mbake. You want to share something?
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Okay, I'm very sorry to jump in like this. I appreciate the discussion, interesting. But there's one point I wanted to make regarding, I heard regarding that there are less and less African Americans joining the Murid community than before. I talked about biology's leadership. But I sense also that my travel in the diaspora, I think young Murids are very eager to spread the teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, and they're very proud of themselves. But sometimes I think they try to impose the wall of culture to new converts, be they Americans or Italians or whatever. And I think Murids, the Murids, which is based on true Islam, is cross-cultural. So I think maybe the youngsters should make more an effort to spread the teachings, but knowing that an American is an American. An American doesn't necessarily eat on the floor by his hand. I mean, these are like cultural things, and I think Islam goes beyond cross-cultural things. I mean, if you look at the what they call the Maqasid Sharia, the objectives of Islam, you realize that in any civilization, if you're from Jurbel, from Touba, from Sweden, or from America, you can be a true Murid, but using your own culture. I think there's an effort that needs to be made on that side. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I think it's an important question, but it's also a question which raises the issue of the identity of the Muridiya as an expression which is radically Wolof. We like it or not. So the issue again is an issue of adaptation, is an issue of, being, integrating, acculturating, or assimilating. These are also questions, NST, whatever new culture is being brought here, will have to address. It's about how do you do that? Because probably a lot of people who are attracted by the Muridiya are attracted by the way in which Islam is understood through a culture, which is a wall of culture, we like it or not. And how do you deal with that is important. Again, one of Professor Babu's mentor, Professor David Robinson, has been writing about, is Islam Africanized or Africa Islamized? So the tension between the two processes is an important tension to pay attention to.
I really liked Lamin's intervention. I think he makes a very important point. One I've observed over and over in my research is, for example, I witnessed a young African-American woman say the Shahada and join Islam and join the Muridiya. But she doesn't speak Wolof. And at the event, every single aspect of the evening where she was, everything happened in Wolof language only, except for when the Imam made sure she understood what she was saying in the Arabic Shahada, and he repeated it for her in English. So how does a young woman like that become an active Murid if she doesn't speak Wolof and she doesn't know anything about Senegalese culture? So Lamin, you raised a very significant question.
Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much for, again, emphasizing that question. I think even us as this has been also a challenge for us. And I'm glad that, we can see that you're paying attention to the same challenges. So it's a gleaming light for us as well. I remember one time, one of our goals was to have a lounge, like a Murid lounge, where it could be a place where we could just serve coffee tuba, have a big screen where people can come and watch the news, and just have our bean bags laying around, very informal. I think we were trying to kind of like bring our American side of it. A place where we don't have to come and be completely outside of our daily life of Harlem. And unfortunately, that goal we haven't reached yet. We are still trying. And it was a way for us to be able to unite all Murids This is heartbreaking. It's a travesty when we see that the people that we really think that in the future will be carrying, will be the standard bearer of Muridiism here, which are the Americans, we still have to face that challenge. So we are calling on our elders to really help us. We are doing in NST is that we have our website, which is ndawi-touba.org, and over there we are trying to bridge, the gap, and hopefully we will be able to succeed in the coming years, inshallah.
All right. The interest is pretty high, and I like the dynamics. We are half an hour already past the time. I'll take one question from Golden Gilawar. Your comment, you can type it, but a quick question because we have a long day ahead.
Yeah.
Gilawar. Then I give the mic back to Dr. Juf.
Thank you very much, Sidi. I think that this panel was a great panel with many questions, but also many answers. But I think what we have unveiled, which is really important, is processes in which social actors are trying to deal with issues which are issues about the future of the next generation, not only of the next generation of the Murids, but of the next generation of West Africa. What it shows also is the importance of religion. The importance of religion has a kind of double instrument, an instrument to shape its singular identity, but an instrument which could allow you also to be included in a larger society. And what are the consequences of this double pressure? Pressure is something important we'll have to deal with. To address one question, this is the question of an American Muridiya. Is it possible to reconcile values which are coming from different culture? Is it possible to deal with the impact of the environment in which people are settling on their tradition? But is it possible also to use, this is the whole discussion about peace, to use that tradition to affect the environment in which they are living? And these are questions which are in front of us. And the responses, NST is one of them, but the responses are different. I think that it's impossible to say that you have one view of the Murids about how do you deal with the American environment. You have people who are, and I think it's what is happening with the elite. I just mentioned that Don Carter has already shown that what happened in Italy in the 90s was the consequence of the emergence of a Murid elite, which is educated, which try to universalize Murid, which try to open a new discussion. And it's interesting because he's saying they are acting like Southern Italian coming in North Italy, that it's a kind of a process of adjusting to the Italian and adjusting their ideology. Another thing which Jonathan said, but which many scholars have said, I have written about that what is interesting, and this is probably the most important challenge which we have discussed, is you have a generation which is settling in this country, and it's a generation of citizens, and they are acting differently from the early generation, which was not necessarily planning to stay. So I think that what we need to, and I hope, and I'm sure that the NST will do the work. I know that Serigne Mamoun Mbake is very interested on that. But these are questions which are defined by uncertainty. We don't know the trajectory, but we have to look at it and we have to work on it. And the pedagogical aspect, which is one of the critical lessons of Ahmadou Bamba, is very, very important to pay attention to. That the teaching, what are young Murīd taught in the US and how it is taught to them, bearing in mind that they are in an environment which is actually an environment which could derail them. So what does it mean? It means that this is a critical intervention, and the NST is absolutely a critical instrument to address the many, many challenges migrants, being Murīd or not, are facing in this country. So I would like to thank Jonathan, to thank Ada Binta Job, to thank Adim Bousso for helping us have a very, very productive discussion by shaping it and providing the necessary information. So thank you very much. And I would like to thank Sidi also for the great job he has done to put together these many panels. So thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
I think, Professor, it could not have been a better closing. Even though there are other questions, I think you raised the right questions and you highlighted the challenges that are ahead and what Ndawi need to do or should be aware of for the next few years coming ahead. Now, there are 3 TV stations that are carrying this panel live, and they have asked that they summarize it in Wolof. The interest is very high. So I've asked Jibi Jan to summarize it in literally less than 5 minutes or 5 minutes what we covered in almost an hour and a half.
Thank you, Sidi. Jürgen, Jeff, thank you very much all. Jonathan, thank you for being here. And thank you for your input and your insights about NST and Ndawi Serigne Touba. Thank you, Sohda Binta, Professor Diouf, thank you very much. Jërëngeen jëf ñi ñuy seetaan yéen yëpp tey nag la woon li nga xam ne moom lañ jiitalee li nga xam ne mooy journée culturelle Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba yi fii ci New York niñ koy defee at bu nekk xam ngeen ni li xew ci àdduna bi yëpp moo ñu tap ñun ñëpp tax ñu daje fii tey di waxtaan lii tey nag tàmbali nañ ci 10 heures suba nga xam ni religious motivation for local economic development daanaka li nga xam ni maanaam koom ak développement da nga xam ni que diine moo nekk si ginnaaw lal ko kooku nag kii di Laura Cochrane nga xam ni jàngalekat la fii ci université fii ci Amérique ak kii di Mokhtar Sarr sëñ Mokhtar Sarr moom daanaka day yëngatu lu bari ci wàllu finance maanaam lépp loo xam ne que dafa jëm ci luy taxawal luy doxal koom wala luy taxawal ay defaru wala yu mel noonu yi nga xam ne lépp day suqali koom ak yu mel noonu moom ci lay yëngatu ak professeur professeur Mamadou waaw ñoom ñooñu ñoo seqoon waxtaan boobu kon am na damba bu moo doon modéré panel boobu waxtaan nañ waxtaan yu am solo ndax docteur Cochrane ñëwaat na ci li nga xam ne mooy daara jooju nga xam ne Babacar Mbow sos na ko fële ca Mbacke Kajoor nga xam ne moom li mu fay yëngatu gis nañ ko yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ngi topp ñooñ ñi nga xam ne dañuy yëngatu ci wàllu boobu Babacar Mbow nekk foofu ak soxnaam ñuy yëngatu ci wàllu yooyu di defar li nga xam ni koom la waaye li ko laal ci ginnaaw spiritualité la muy lu jëm ci xam-xam ak jaamu yàlla nekk ci ginnaaw ak di yar nit yi ci wàllu woowu te nga xam ne lépp dafay wëlbatiku ñëwaat ci li nga xam ni mooy njàngale Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba bi nga xam ni foofu ci Mbàkke Kajoor amoon na fa cosaan la ci yoonu murid bi nga xamee ne nag kii jël na kàddu professeur Mbodj moom it indi na waat ay yeneen jottali si wàllu boobu nga xam ni moom moo jëm ci li nga xam ni démbi yoonu murid ak bu yoonu murid di sosu ñoom yoonu murid ni ñu def ba tasaare non seulement li nga xam ne mooy njàngale sëñ bi ci yeneen wàll waaye wane nañ ko ci wàllu koom ak ni ñu sancee occuper espace bi nga xam ni mooy diggante Saalum foofu noonu jàpp ba dem ba Gàmbi professeur Mbodj ñëwaat na ci loolu lu bëree bëri ki nga xam ne nag mooy Mokhtar Sarr moom li mu gën a yëkkati maanaam li mu doon gën a wax ci yeneen wàll mooy naka la ñuy mën a tey nii fi ñu toll nii di wax naka la ñu mënee fexe ba xale yi ndaw yi am liggéey ci li nga xam ni Serigne Touba bàyyi na ko ci njàngaleem ak ci philosophie bi nga xam ne moom la bàyyi muy philosophie économique ak philosophie boobu nga xam ne mooy philosophie wu liggéey nga xam ni que tey xale yu bëri bu ñuy ñëw tey ci yoonu murid lu mel ne fële ca Mbàkke Kajoor bi nga xam ne Laura Cochrane moom la joxe exemple nee na ko foofu tey xale yi ñu bëri dañ fay ñëw te duñu àndaale métier te duñu àndaale xam-xam duñu xam dara bu ñu nekkee foofu nag amuñu dara lu leen occupé maanaam amuñu liggéey amuñu xëy day tax day indi yeneen problème foofu noonu ci dëkk bi ak ci société bi nee na nag moom gis na ni li ñu war a def mooy daal di sos lu mel ni ay infrastructure maanaam ay jumtukaay yoo xam ni dinañu mën a taxaw ci li nga xam ni moom la ñu am fi mu toll nii maanaam pour mën ci defar liggéey pour mën a sos ay liggéey nga xam ne xale yi mën nañu am ci lu ñu jàpp ñu wàññi taux de chômage bi ci xale yi ak ndaw yi defe naa ne moom Mokhtar Sarr moom ci lu mel noonu la doon gën a waxtaan te defe naa lu am solo la ñaareelu panel bi ñoom bi ñu ñëwee ñu ngi doon wax ci maanaam li nga xam ni mooy ndonal non violence nag mooy lépp loo xam ni ci jàmm rek la day daw day moytu xeex ak musiba ak yu ni mel ak fitna yee fitna kooku nag ki ko seexoon mooy professeur Pissarda ak kii di Souhaïbou Kébé sëñ Souhaïbou Kébé nekkoon Sénégal Touba professeur Pissarda moom ma nga woon Londres professeur Cheikh Anta Babou nag moom moo doon modéré panel bi am na ay speaker bi nga xam ne moom moo doon professeur Pissarda moom moo doon def waxtaan bi bi mu ko defee bi mu koy def nag moom daanaka fii nga xam ni moom fa la doon gën a waxtaan mooy daanaka li nga xam ni dañ koy moom ci li mu wax dañuy seetlu lu bëri ne sëñ Touba daanaka philosophie non violence am bi maanaam bañ a yor ngànnaay di xeex comme niñ ko daan defee niñ ko xamee woon moom loolu rek la ñuy faral di xool te it dañuy faral di jàpp ne loolu daf koo def ngir xeex colonialisme ni mu doon xeexe colonialisme ci maanaam xam-xam ak ragal yàlla boobu nee na moom nag am na feneen foo xam ne war nañ fay xoolee Serigne Touba ci moom ni mu ko gisee nga xam ni non violence am boobu du rek niñ koy jàppee comme ni ma ko waxee foofu lañ ko war a xoolee ndax gën naa war a mën a sori loolu te li ko Serigne Touba doxalee naka est-ce que noonu la ko ñeneen ñi doon doxalee moom nee na déedéet ndax ni ko Serigne Touba doxalee dina fa particulier ci wàll woo xam ne que du woon rek daf ci jublu woon pour xeex ñi nga xam ne ñooy tubaab yi fa nekkoon ci jamonoom ñi mu jamonoon teel waaye daf ko jële fu sore nga xam ne ci maanaam ndonal yeneen beneen bi nga xam ni que Souhaïbou Kébé moom it indi na ay yeneen xalaat ci kaw loolu mottali li nga xam ne moom la professeur Pissarda doon wax te nga xam ne it professeur Babou bi mu jëlee doon na leen laaj ci ba xam wax na fa pacifisme wax na fa non violence wax na ak li nga xam ni moom mooy activisme non violence yooyu yëpp bi ko professeur Pissarda di tontu nag moom nee na ko dañuy jàpp ne rek mënuñu jàppee Serigne Touba ni mu doon def comme pacifisme ndax pacifisme dafay romb foofu moom loolu joxe na ci sax ay exemple ñoom ki nga xam ni mooy Gandhi ak kii di Martin Luther King ñoom ñëpp tuddaale na leen waaye daf ni Serigne Touba moom dafa romb foofu ndax moom non violence am daf ci boole woon activisme boobu nag activisme pacifique la ak activisme non violent boo xam ni dafa communauté am dafa doon am yeneen aspect yoo xam ni daf ci boole woon xeexam boobu muy développer communauté am di sanc ay daara di defar ay nit di defari tool yuy bay nit ñi di am indépendance ak autonomie loolu tam amoon na solo lool ci li nga xam ni moomu doon na ko wax yéen ñi nag seen yéen laay mujjee daaneele yéen a ngi fi toog ak man ba léegi xam nañ ne que ndawi Sëñ Touba ñoom gis nañ ne ren moom macha allah am na lu bëri loo xam ni ñu ngi koy jàng ci ñoom te fi ñu ko tàmbalee mooy ci kii ngeen di gis nii muy Jonathan Bonman sunu xarit la sunu frère la tam te moom day yëngatu ci day gëstu ci non violence lay gëstu nekk ci bànqaas nga xam ne mooy këru jàngu bi la nekk benn këru jàng bu nekk fii nga xam ne suñu mbokk la dund na Sénégal lu yàgg wax na ko ci bi muy ñëwee bi muy dund na Sénégal lu yàgg ay lu toll ci fukki at ak ay yeneen pays africain sax lu mel ne ay Malek yooyu dund na fa lépp nag ci tasaare wax yi yontu yàlla Insa nga xam ni moom ci loolu lay yëngatu waaye itam dafa maanaam jàngaleem li nga xam ne ci philosophie non violence Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba daf ko intéressé li mu doon gëstu daf ko ci boolewaale ba ñëw fi ci communauté bi nekk fi lu yàgg di gëstu lu bëri léegi nag fekk tombé nag bi muy gëstoo bi mu koy def ndawi Sëñ Touba si lañ taxawal ndawi Sëñ Touba nag fii lañ nekk ci Harlem waaye daanaka léegi tas nañ ci Amérique yëpp moom nag bi mu jógee ci loolu mu daal di gis ne ndawi Sëñ Touba yi am na lu intéressant lu mu gis ci ñoom loo xam ne war na koo mën a dugal ci gëstoom bi muy def nga xam ne mi ngi préparé doctorat am te dugg na ci biir def na ci chapitre bu am solo lii di tam magazine u Mika bi génne ren nii xam naa dinañ leen ko distribuer yéen ñëpp soxla Binta ak yéen Jonathan yéen ñëpp di ngeen jot seen copie incha allah ak professeur Diouf buñ ko deful sax am na ci chapitre am boobu mu traité ndawi Sëñ Touba def nañ ko ci biir magazine bi xam naa ñëpp dinañ ci jot gën ko yër gën ci jàng ndax it loolu la nga xam ni moom soxna Binta moom yoroon wax ci ndawi Sëñ Touba da nga xam ni professeur Diouf it am na yeneen question yu mu soulevé yu am solo muy question race bi maanaam xeet der ndax njàngaleem Sëñ Touba tam am na ci lu bëri loo xam ne dafa jëm ci loolu te imaam Xaadim Bousso doon na ci ñëwaat te tam encore muy loo xam ne fi ñu nekk ni ci contexte bi ñuy wax nii ak li nga xam ni ndawi Sëñ Touba dañ ko jël def ko seen mission muy maanaam wane yoonu jàmm ak nekk ci bëggante jàppante yooyu yëpp nga xam ne dafa bokk ci jàngale philosophie yoonu murid ak murid way of life nga xam ne moom la ñu bëgg a tasaare fii waaye li professeur Diouf wax tamit dañ ci war a ñëwaat bàyyi si xel bu baax Jonathan defe naa ne loolu dina am solo lool ci sa gëstu yi ngay def nga xoolaale question raciale boobu nga xam ni que naka la ndawi Sëñ Touba fi nga xam ni dañoo am na tam ci ñiy laaj question ci ñi seetaan am na ci ku ci laaj question bu nga xam ni moom it am na solo lool mooy naka la ñuy mën a taxawale ay yoon maanaam ay pont ci diggante communauté africaine américaine bi en particulier ak communauté ak société américaine en général par rapport ak li nga xam ni mooy communauté musulmane yi maa nga xam ne ci l'islam la ñu tënku bien que am nañu yeneen façon wala yeneen buntu yu ñuy jaar lu mel ne yoonu murid wala yeneen tarixa yu fi am defe naa loolu lu am solo la kon xam naa maa ngi yem fii sëñ Sidi jërë ngeen jëf ñu ngi leen sant bu baax xam naa dañuy jël pause après Sidi ñëwaatee ba ci kanam jërë ngeen jëf.
So once again, thank you for this wonderful panel. I will see you at 2 o'clock Eastern time. And many questions have been asking, how do you connect Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba or the Muridiya with artificial intelligence and web security? So stay tuned 21 minutes and you will hear some dynamic PhDs debate among themselves about how Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba is showing up in the 21st century. See you later, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.